I was at the Atlanta Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech, as we like to call it. And it was my first weekend of moving into school. All the freshmen were gathered around and we were trying to figure out, all right, where's the next party? Where are we going to? It's our first weekend, we got to start it off right. The seniors came to us and said, hey, it's this nice club, we want to bring you to it, just to introduce you to college life. It's called Swingin' Richards. It didn't dawn on me, the name. I was very oblivious at the time. I did not realize that Dick was short for Richard, and that ultimately this was a gay strip club. I didn't end up going, thank God, but this was my first weekend in college. I was very unprepared, and there was nothing that could have prepared me what happened. And years and years and years later, this is my 5th year of school. I'm a 5th year senior at Emmanuel College, and I've come a long way since then. I've taken a multitude of classes from 3 different universities, and 3 of these years have been spent at Emmanuel. I've taken research methods. I've taken about every kind of communication course out there where I've learned how to analyze body language. I've learned how to analyze communication styles, analyze people's personality traits to help me develop relationships with those kinds of people. And I really wanted to use this knowledge in order to help young incoming freshmen not be put in the situations that I was in. So what did I do? I wrote a book called Things That I Wish I Knew About College, and I will pass this around one to each side so that y'all can look at it for a little bit as I'm going on. So why did I do it? I want to show you guys a little context. This is my sister Allie. We were very close, we were 5 years apart. And this is us a couple months ago at a singer's trip. But something very scary that is about to happen is she's graduating this month. She's about to graduate high school. And if she's anything like me, which I know she is, she's very sweet but very oblivious. And I'm very scared for her in her college walk. And this got me thinking in my research about other college students, about other freshmen that I may not be emotionally connected to like my sister, but that have the same struggles that I did and that she will in the future she'll have. If you look at my board, there's a statistic from a study done by Youth Truth, a nonprofit organization in San Francisco. They researched over 165,000 high school students, and they conducted a survey, and they came out with results that 45% of these students felt prepared for college. Now, that's an overwhelming amount of students that are unprepared. It's 55%. So this goes into the content of my book. What's it all about? It's a very short book. It's also a very quick read. There are 6 chapters. There are practical lessons throughout the book about the college life, but there's also some deep lessons involved too. And I want to walk you guys today through the contents of my book. I also want to tell you about why I did it, and I also want to tell you the last point of how I did it. So the first chapter is called Who Am I? This is all about finding your identity in college. One of the points that I hit on is being okay with not being accepted. That is something that a lot of people go into college, especially if you have an outgoing personality, you really want to feel accepted. So that's something that it's not going to happen. Not everybody's going to like you. And that's something I touch on in my book, as well as pulling on the same end of the rope. You want to surround yourself with people that are, in essence, pulling on the same end of the rope as you. They don't necessarily have to be like-minded, but it has to be people who are life-giving and are willing to help you in the process. The second chapter is called Being a Broke College Kid, or BCK. I talk about scholarships and grants. Part of my research is I went down to financial aid and I just sat down for about an hour and a half and I just talked with one of the representatives there, and they walked me through the school's website that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different grants where some just require an essay. And it's like, hey, here's $1,000. She said that there is no excuse for going into debt for college because there's so many resources out there for you that if you go into debt, it's because you're lazy, not because there's not resources out there to help you. As well as discounts for students. Something that took me probably 3 years to understand is that businesses are willing to help students, that there are so many resources out there allocated towards and geared towards college students. Rather than losing business because they know we're broke, they'd rather help us and gain their business for future generations to come. So having that .edu in the back of your email gives you open access to many different services. I know you can get free shipping with Amazon Prime, Hulu gives you discounts, Apple Music. I mean, all these different subscriptions are catered towards college students. The next chapter is chapter 3. It's called Finding the One. This is talking about dating in college. Something that I touch on is that it's not required. So this is something that coming into college, I remember my first weekend, me and my friends sat at a whiteboard and we wrote down all the names of the girls that we thought were cute. And it was like, okay, what's our game plan? Like, how are you going to win over this person? And it's just not, that's not what this is about. I also want to talk about a relationship with Jesus in the book. So that's something I touch on, is that, yes, where you may find the one in college, but the true one is Jesus. And that's the person that you need to capture a relationship with. And I think the old stereotype of grandparents, especially with my grandparents, is that anytime I went on a date, it was like, hey, you better keep Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John between you and a girl. And that kind of rang true when I was writing this book, because where it's kind of funny to think about, but it's so true that through this crazy ride of college where you're just struggling and trying to find acceptance and you're trying to find affirmation, especially with someone of the opposite sex in a relationship, it's easy to forget the relationship that you have with Christ. In chapter 4, I talk about, this isn't high school anymore. So this is a chapter dealing with the transition from high school to college. It goes into forming healthy habits such as exercise. The freshman 15 is real. And that's something I talk about in the book, where you don't have, you may not be in your high school sport anymore, and you don't have people telling you what to do. You're on your own schedule. So you have to start actively forming your own healthy habits. In my research that I conducted, I found that a lot of people just don't know how to study. It's something that's not really required in high school because the curriculums are fairly easy. So a lot of students come to college that just really don't know how to study. So I go into how to study and a lot of different healthy habits to study. And the last part of the chapter is about time management. Like I said before, coming into college, you may not be right underneath your parents. I know my mom used to wake me up in the morning and flip on my light and say, hey, it's time to get ready for school. That's something you don't have when you get to college. And a lot of times that's why students fail. A statistic that I found online in a peer-reviewed article stated that 68% of reasons why college freshmen drop out or fail their classes are personal reasons, such as time management, personality issues, things that is their own fault because they were not prepared. Chapter 5 is called Surviving Your Roommate 101. Being in Red's Life and being under John Campbell, which is the director of Red's Life, I was able to learn a lot of different things by hands-on experience myself, as well as just horror stories from John in the past of different things that happen with roommate conflicts, as well as my own conflicts that I've had with roommates in the past. And it's an issue that can easily be solved. So I talk about love and respect and servanthood. This is a Christian-based book, based for a Christian college, so I go into a lot of Christian aspects of love and respect among your roommate, how you need to serve the other person and sacrifice your own well-being, sacrifice your own wants and needs in order to ensure a good relationship with the roommate. I also talk about conflict management and how to solve different problems. A lot of problems that occur in a roommate situation is something that's very small, that over time it builds and builds and builds and builds until the end of the year you hate each other and you don't speak, where you could have talked it out. That's something I really touch on in the book, is called talking it out. Someone may not be as outgoing as the other person in this situation, so it's very, very beneficial to about any situation, whether it's music, headphones, TV, just talk about it. The last chapter in my book is called Keeping the Faith. This is something where I go really deep. I talk about lust and sexual desires, talk about closing the yearbook, and also talk about staying in the Word. When I dig into lust and sexual desires, I loved a sermon that I watched by Stephen Furtick. He's not my favorite, but I actually did like this specific sermon. And he talks about lust and sexual desire being like a fire, where fire provides warmth, it sustains, it cleanses, it also cooks. There's a lot of benefits to fire. What's bad about fire is when it's not contained. And so if we had a fire right here, it really wouldn't be a problem if you had rocks or a fire pit. The problem would be if it was just spreading and it burned down this whole building. So that's something that I touch on in the book, is that lust and sexual desire may not be such a bad thing when it's contained in the confines of marriage. And so I touch on that, especially in the dating chapter, but more importantly in this chapter, where we don't necessarily throw sticks and stones at the thought of a sexual desire, because that's the way God created us. We're meant to procreate. That's the way our bodies are formed, but it's meant to be confounded. I'll also talk about closing the yearbook. My freshman year, I remember many times where a handle of vodka was shoved in my face, and when I said no, I really don't want to do that, it's like, come on bro, close the yearbook. Come on, it's saying high school more. Close your book. I go into that. Yes, you need to mature and you need to grow up when you make the transition from high school to college, but what you don't need to do is close the yearbook in the sense of, I'm going to compromise and I'm going to turn away from the values that I was raised in just because I'm in a new place, just because my parents aren't here. You still need to hold fast and you still need to hold on to the things that you were raised in doing. Staying in the Word. This is one of the covenant behaviors that we learn in Res Life, that we learn in RA training. It's called staying fit. So, along with exercise in the physical sense, you need to stay fit in the spiritual sense. You can get really busy in college, and something I touch on in the book is staying spiritually fit. Staying in the Word, keeping that relationship with Jesus. Staying fit in the sense of you're feeding yourself spiritually. Because if you're pouring out and you're doing all these things, eventually you're going to die if you're not putting back in. So now I'd like to talk about how I did it. I'd like to transition to looking at the board. This started with a lot of research. I scoured the internet, all kind of peer-reviewed articles, mainly across the national level to get an idea of what freshmen struggle with across the nation, why they're dropping out, why they're failing their classes. And I wanted to see what they were struggling with. From there, I started the interview process, where I actually interviewed students across the campus to see what they struggled with, to see what they wish they knew in college. And then I got to a stage called brainstorming, where most people think brainstorming starts at the beginning. For me, it was more towards the middle, because I'm not a very organized person, and so I had all of this information sitting out here, and it's like, okay, now what do I do with it? So I had to think about what went with what. So after researching and after interviewing, I started to piece together, okay, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. And that actually enabled me to start forming my chapters. And so I started to type it from there. And after that, it was just actually sitting down and writing the book with the information that was given. And this is the part that I found the most fulfilling and enjoyable, because I'm not a research person. I don't enjoy research. What I do enjoy is creative writing. And so, where the book may have had gaps, where someone may have not given me that deep testimony that I was hoping for, it was more practical, that could fill a certain chapter, but I was able to fill chapters with my own life experience, my own credibility, and I really enjoyed doing that. Now to recap today, I've told you what I've done, which is my book. I've told you why I did it, and I hope you got a little bit of emotional conviction about my sister soon graduating. And I actually told you about how I went about creating this process and how I made the book. Something I want to leave you with is a quote from myself. And this is directed to the faculty and staff in this room and on campus. Emmanuel does such a good job of pouring into us as students. They do such a good job with discipleship. And so what I want to do is just give back to this community, and I think that's the way that this process works, is as you're poured in, you leave and you pour back out. And so with this book, that's something I'd love to do, is give back to a future generation of college students coming up. And eventually I would hope that this could be used in a freshman seminar class, or even if that's not possible, then to just have this book given to the freshmen in the goodie bag that you receive during orientation. So thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Are there any questions? Just that.
Kind of a two-headed question. One is, if you had more time, what would you write another chapter on? And then the second is, can I get a signed book after?
If there's something that I could write another chapter on, I don't know if I can answer that question off the top of my head. I would have loved to go more in depth into all of the chapters, but one specifically that I didn't necessarily have time to go back into more, but I wish I could, was Surviving Your Roommate 101. I gave very broad problems, but I wish I could have dug into specific issues and had more testimonies. I wish I had more time to go into testimonies and have more people give input. That's something I didn't have a lot of, and so it was hard to actually get a lot of those into the book because I didn't have a lot of relevant testimonies. Most of the testimonies were kind of vague, like, oh, college is expensive. And it's like, okay, when you have 30 of those, it's hard to put everybody's in there.
And the second part was, can he get a book?
Signed autograph.
But he has to order them. You don't
I have to order. They only cost $2.
So Daniel, did you set out to write a book? Was that or did you gather all this and realize, wow, I could turn this into a book?
So I didn't set out to write a book. What this actually started as, and I actually didn't get into it. I'm glad you asked that question. So this started actually as a letter that I was going to write to my sister as a graduation present. My very first senior project was kind of vague and weird, and I was working on it for most of the semester. And so actually over Christmas break, that's something that I was kind of thinking about, like, man, I really would love to write my sister this kind of extended letter and give to her as a graduation present. And I was like, oh, this sounds a lot better than what I'm doing right now. So that actually formed into the process of writing the book. When I got back from Christmas break, I started writing emails and talking to Doc G about making a transition.
Oh, cool.
Do you plan on getting this published?
It actually is currently published.
I mean, like with a
Self-published,
real,
but
like.
she means seeking
Not
out a
self-published,
publishing
Like
house.
Zondervan.
Publishing house.
I would love to do that if it's good enough. I haven't had it. It hasn't been read by enough credible people. So before I get heartbroken, I'll let other people read it. Eric.
If you decide to write a new book, what would that be about? Have you thought about that?
I love theology, and I love apologetics. I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough right now to write a book, but later in life I'd love to start writing some Christian-based theology books, and also just maybe write a book about my testimony. Haley.
Did you, in the course of writing this, did you even think like about maybe a chapter on identity? Because I know that's a big issue a lot of people.
That's what the first chapter was. It's called Who Am I?
Oh
It's
yeah.
all about finding your identity in college.
Oh.
Yes.
Do you think like you need to transfer to different colleges to find the one that fits you most, or just do the research beforehand?
So you saying which college fit me the most?
Yeah, like because you have to transfer to like.
Yeah, so process of transferring schools, I transferred because of playing college baseball. So I lost my scholarship at one school, transferred to another, graduated and came here. But this one definitely fit me the most. I love this school, and I can say that it was a hard transition. My birthday's in August, so for probably about 3 years I never celebrated my birthday because I was at a new school every year and didn't have any friends. So it was very hard going to new schools every year. But I spent 3 years at this school. First year I hated it, didn't want to come back ever again. My senior year it was like, and then this year definitely figured out that this is where I love to be. I love this school.
Thanks, Daniel.